Namaste, namaskaram, vanakkam, namo namaha, Jai Ganesha. Please visit our website at classicalyoga.org. And there is a donate button there if you'd like to help us out. And please stand up for the Hindu yoga, religious, spiritual, scientific, philosophical lifestyle. Let's have some fun today with some past and present cliches and some acronyms. Do you dig it? Dug in? Throughout the ages, we always use some kind of cliches between each other to, in a sense, ask each other if we are on the same page, if you will, if we get it. If you go back to the 50s and the 60s, often people said, "Do you dig it, man?" Yeah, I dig it. Are you hip? Groovy? Right on? Today, people might say, "You feel me?" Are we on the same page? Copacetic? Synergy? To the Hindus, acha? Or, profoundly, the simple head waggle. I feel you, I get you. I understand where you're coming from. I dig it. Now, if we make an acronym out of DIG, hopefully by the end of this podcast, you'll ask yourself, do I get it? Now, the past tense of dig is dug. They dug a hole. A pit. Interesting. We often use that in a negative when one is feeling really bad. I feel like the pits, or that's the pits. In other words, in this case, the hole is a negative thing when we get stuck in a hole. And it's interesting, as humans, we often dig our own holes and then jump in. Through our lack of understanding of right and wrong, which can ultimately lead to various negative addictions, where we get just stuck in a hole of our own making, of which we must climb out and start all over again. However, one can also be dug in a positive way, having resolve, resolution. This would be Shraddha to the Hindus, being fully established, dug in to the Dharma, fully knowing what one is doing. Developing a strong foundations, as we go through the many aspects of life. Being very earthy, being grounded. And of course, as Hindus, those of you that have been listening to our many podcasts, and all Hindus should know that we always start with Mahaganapati and the first chakra, Muladhara, and the earth element, and being grounded, and the worship of Bhumi Mata, actually Ritrijam, victory to order and Mother Nature, is the first written word for what we Hindus call the Hindu Dharma. By implication, Hindu is the first word, obviously. Chandra Sarid Soma Bindu. This is what it means to be a Hindu. As we worship the moon and the rivers and the sun and the nectar of bliss within, and being fully grounded, having a strong foundation in the Dharma, Shraddha. And with this foundation, we Hindus then follow the natural process of Karma Yoga, Hindu ethics, Bhakti Yoga, Hindu devotions, Raja Yoga, Hindu contemplations, and on to the inner realizations and outer study of Gyan Yoga. As we Hindus, if you will, seek to dig each other, to get it. Remember the end of the Rig Veda, the rishis were promoting a sense of Sangam or unity, a Hindu family. Samani Baha Krutihi, may we be tranquilly united in our resolve. We're getting each other. Samana Hridayanti Vaha, may we be tranquilly united in our love. Love for each other, love for the Dharma. Smanam Hastu vo mano, may we be tranquilly united in our thought process. Yatavaha susaha sati, therefore we will live, in a sense, happily ever after. However, there are always those who, for one reason or another, and in relatively recent times, comparing the age of the Hindu Yoga Dharma, thousands and thousands of years old. There have always been those who have attempted to make Hindu Dharma into what is essentially a fundamentalist, universalist path, which is the other extreme of the pure fundamentalist. Those of you that have listened to our many podcasts will get this, and we use an acronym, the NAT principle. We must ultimately understand that our religion is not the way, which is the pure, if you will, fundamentalist, nor the other extreme of the universalist, the all-way people, which is really no way at all when you examine it. Ultimately, we find a balance in the middle. This is the A of the NAT principle, where we humbly and maturely, rationally admit that our religion is a way. It's not the way, and it's not no way or a universal way. This universalist notion does pervade many religions, as people who, for example, have been grown up or have grown up within just a specific religion, and obviously that's all they know. And they either become the fundamentalist in the sense that everything else is wrong, or they think that everything is merely a reflection of their tradition. This is the other extreme of the fundamentalist universalist. See the fundamentalism in it? Because they're still doing something very specific, but they're saying that that really does manifest in every other ideology, every other religion. This is clear in the fairly modern Hare Krishna movement, which is a prime example of this fundamentalist universalist mindset. When push comes to shove, they'll tell you, well, yeah, Krishna is really God, and they'll use the Christian word God. And everything manifests from Krishna. Therefore, they will see other religions as valid in that sense. Whereas, on the other hand, the pure fundamentalists, like the Christians, for example, and the Muslims, they believe that they have the one universal religion, but that means that every other religion is false. One has to belong to the universal religion. In other words, Jesus is the only way, for example, the Christian mindset, or La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasul, there's no Allah but Allah. Both extremes are, of course, just that. However, in a way, the pure, if you will, fundamentalist is much more honest, because they will out front tell you that their way is the true way. There's only one God, of course. Which one? Whereas the fundamentalist universalist, whether they know it or not, some are just so steeped into it they don't know it. Others are actually out for the con job, if you will. When they really say they embrace all other religions, and that's because in the basic mindset is that, well, that's because our tradition is the root of all the other religions. This has given birth to today's modern, spurious, phony yoga movement. And this movement has been spearheaded by Delusional Universal Gurus. So here's our acronym for D.U.G. In this case, a negative D.U.G. Having dug a hole of deception. Delusional Universal Gurus. You can listen to our podcast on the con art of living to show how the fairly recent phenomena going back to the 50s and certainly in the 60s, where we had numerous Indian quote-unquote gurus that came to America or some state in India, and people pilgrimaged to India, where they were presenting a universal panacea, if you will, claiming, for example, that yoga is for everybody, meaning all religions. Is this any different than the saying Jesus is for everybody? The latter, of course, is meaning that Jesus is the true way. Now, everybody must ultimately realize that and follow that. But the other extreme of the fundamentalist universalist, yoga is for everybody, is giving lip service to the other religions of the world, Because in essence, what these delusional universal gurus end up doing, even though they may say that they respect Christianity and Islam and the other religions of the world, everyone is ultimately being, in a sense, forced to conform to that specific group and that specific guru, if you will. Hence it becomes a cultic experience. People really don't go back to their specific religions, even though the quote-unquote guru may pay lip service to these religions. They do not want their students to go back to them. They want them to stay in their cultic group. So it becomes a very negative experience that has harmed the lives of many people, and sometimes it's taken many years for people to figure out that they've been duped by somebody who may be consciously doing this or just duped themselves by their quote-unquote guru. So these delusional universal gurus, again, claim to respect other religions, but simply ask them, what is your religion? See what the answer is. To a person, they will give some vague answer that, oh, we follow the universal religion. We're beyond religion. Wait a minute. If you get beyond religion, then obviously you followed a religion to get there. So all one has to look at is the gurus such as Maharishi Mahesh. And when you listen to our podcast on the con art of living, we go into much detail here, but basically, like the Maharishi Mahesh's organization, they said this is the most effective way, this meditation. Then we have Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, who says he doesn't belong to any religion. And then we have the infamous Deepak Chaudhry, who again claims to be a universalist, but not specifically a Hindu. Though again, all these people are taking everything from the Hindu Yoga Dharma. And interestingly, Chopra and Sri Sri were ex-TMers. Then we had the infamous Bikram. We all know what happened to him with his hot yoga. Remember when he went to California, Shirley MacLaine told him, don't say you're a Hindu or people won't come to your class. See, there's the problem right there. All of these guys were afraid to admit that they were Hindus because why? They'd lose their fame and their student attendance, and they'd lose their, obviously, monetary gains, material possessions. It was very interesting. Many of them came from poorer areas of India, so obviously when they came to America, wow, the land of money and cars and women. It's not a coincidence that there were innumerable scandals behind these people. You had the infamous Swamis Muktananda, Swami Rama, Yogi Desai, all created these universal organizations. Of course, yoga's at the core, but it becomes universal. Right? And they all had sexual scandals along with them. And of course, the infamous Rajneesh, Osho, and the devastating cult created in Oregon. How many of these does it take before people wake up to realize, well, wait a minute, we have been trapped here. We've been stuck in a hole of our own making following these cultic leaders. You also had the really insane fellow, Bubba Freejohn, who called himself later Adida or something. Again, a universal movement, bought an island in the Fiji Islands. It's amazing they attract a lot of people, a lot of money. And of course we have the more modern darlings of the now deceased Joyce and Desikachar, the Ashtanga Yoga darlings who stole everything from the Yoga Sutras. Remember, the Yoga Sutras of the Saiva Hindu Guru Patanjali have absolutely nothing to do with any specific asana, so the Ashtanga Yoga is totally false. And all of the students that studied under them, like the KKK brothers, Listen to our podcast on that. The Kest brothers and their power yoga and Kino. And one has to look back, of course, to Krishnamacharya, because he really, in a sense, started this. He was considered the father of modern, I would say, phony yoga, as he was all too typical of the weak Indian Hindu, capitulating Indian Hindu. When at first he would not teach Eugenia Peterson, because she wasn't a Hindu and she was a woman. I mean, men taught men and women taught women. But he was the court yogi of the Raja of Mysore, and he bended to the Raja's wishes, so he did teach her. And she came to America, now under the name of Indra Devi. At least she changed her name. I mean, that's a good thing. But she then presented this Hatha Yoga to the Hollywood crowd, and it's just gotten worse and worse until today you have this massive spurious yoga movement, universal yoga movement, which is anything but that. And a simple test is that all of you who are into this so-called yoga, just go to your local church, synagogue, go to a mosque. Tell them that yoga is universal. Tell them yoga is for them and see the reaction. Now, many of you are, of course, familiar with the cliche, there's a sucker born every minute. And it was actually falsely attributed to P.T. Barnum, the circus magnate. And actually was done to disparage him, when actually the quote comes from an infamous hitman called Paper Collar Joe. And he actually said there's a sucker born every minute and two to take 'em. So these con games are nothing new. And this fellow was, as far as con men go, he was pretty impressive, and he actually never got caught. He was considered to be one of the most famous flim-flam-ams on the East Coast. And he actually had his own mentor, who was an infamous bunco artist, William Langley. And of course, a bunco artist is a cheat, a swindler. And very interesting that Joe, actually, when he was in New York, he came in contact with our 18th president, President Grant. And somehow they became buddies, and there was an incident where Joe was being accused of a crime, and the president got him off. He said, no, he's my friend. So it's amazing how sometimes, especially in the so-called spiritual realm, these people get connected with politics. Look at our present-day sad guru, pun intended, JV, who courts politicians. So the delusions go on. It seems that many people just kind of like to be fooled. They get into a group consciousness. And so recently we had the late Sai Baba that fooled a lot of people. And interestingly, when the cult leader dies, the organizations always diminish greatly, but they're still going strong in many parts of the world. And Sai was actually caught on tape performing magic tricks when he said they were actually manifestations of his great power, if you will, his siddhis. And then after Sai Baba, we also had the infamous Yogi Bhajan. Whew, he ruined the lives of many people. And it's not a coincidence that there's always sexual scandals with these people, and monetary scandals as well. And again, presently, we still have JV going strong. And even though these people do a lot of good, which obviously is the hook, because they do some good, but why not be honest from the get-go and tell people what you're doing, what you're teaching? Why not? Why cover it up with other acts of charity, which, I mean, that's great. That's really wonderful, but why cover up the truth of something? Because again, perhaps they know that they'll lose students, they'll lose popularity, they'll lose fame, they'll lose money. We also have another infamous fashion guru, if you will, Vishwananda. And again, sexual misconduct there. Then we have a fellow that actually I just became familiar with. He's been going on for a long time. I mean, these things have always been there. And there's just so many of them now. There's a fellow that calls himself Yogi Raj Siddharnath. And again, another delusional universal guru. Look for the word Hindu on those sites. Now remember, at the beginning of this podcast, we use the acronym for D.I.G. Do I get it? So at this point, let's ask ourselves, do I get it? And it's pretty easy to do today, especially with Google. All one has to do, for example, when it comes to yoga is define yoga. You'll find that this is all connected to Hinduism, the Hindu religion. So why not do some research on the various religions of the world and find out what they're all about? And then one can make an honest, ethical, and sane choice whether to follow that or not. Now we use an acronym, the NAT principle. Hopefully coming to a mature realization that our religion is a way. That's the balance in the middle. And not the way, which is the quote-unquote pure fundamentalist that thinks their religion is the only true one and every other one is false or evil, perhaps. Or the other extreme of the New Age, universalist, who uses cliches like, we're all one, no boundaries, no divisions, no labels. How naive is that? And these cliches are just thrown around as wisdom. And again, we have to recognize that what these delusional universal gurus are doing is actually paying lip service to the other religions of the world. But again, they don't want you to go back there. They want you to stay within their cultic group, and everybody ends up adoring the cult leader. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with having great respect for our teachers, but obviously we have to realize when we're tripping over the line here, and especially when we fail to use our common sense and realize what the leader's motives are. Is it just to draw us into a group and away from any rational, critical thinking? Are they more about their own picture and their own personality and then their subsequent price tag? And then don't overlook the scandals that inevitably erupt in these organizations. Now, personally, I think religion is a great thing, and we have to remember, that's the English word we're using, but there are innumerable religions, from Zoroastrianism to Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the typical monotheistic religions, and then obviously the Hindu religion, and then its offshoots, Buddhism, Jain, Sikh, and then we also have Taoism and Confucianism. You even have Celtic traditions still existing. And we can't forget all of the indigenous people around the world that have their profound traditions. We would call them religious traditions, religious spiritual traditions. And remember, keep those two words together. Because spirit refers to that which is not your body, therefore no body is spiritual. But religion are the rules, the regulations, the rituals, the means to the end goal of that which transcends the material. Just simply look at the analogy of a mountain, right? So we look at the top, and perhaps we see a glowing light at the top, and that's where we want to go. So, obviously, in order to get there, we're going to have to ultimately find a way up there. Now, there may be established paths that will lead there, and maybe not all of them do lead there. Maybe some of them are dead ends. And obviously, some may be straighter, some may be more curvy than others. This is a metaphor, an analogy for the different religions of the world, choosing one. And obviously, in order to have those established paths, it had to have innumerable people that created them prior to us. This is very important. And if we want to truly get there, it makes a lot of sense to find somebody who has traveled that path and can help us get there. Now, of course, at this point in human history, there are many established religious traditions, but there's nothing to say that one could not find a new path, but it would be that. It would be new, and it would be starting all over again right from the beginning and hacking our way through. There are rugged individualists, right, in the past, obviously. That's why we have the specific religions of the world today that were willing to do that. So the bottom line is, if one is interested in this realm of life, the religious spiritual realm of life, and one doesn't have to be, I mean, my goodness, just being a good, honest, ethical person is really quite enough. But if one chooses to follow one of the various religious spiritual traditions of the world, do the right thing. Do some serious study. Do some reflection. And If one was born into one and has followed that, fine, but it behooves us as humans to learn a little bit about our fellow human beings, so why not do a comparative religious study? And then if you find that one of these is the one that suits you, well, continue to study. And then if you really want to become a part of it, like anything else in life, make a formal commitment. And it's very common in the religions of the world to take on a name indicative of that religion. That's why it's easy when people call themselves yoga teachers or whatever, Mary yoga teachers, Kino yoga teachers, David. Well, they're clearly nothing of the sort. To be a teacher, remember, students one thing, and anybody's free to study, hopefully, any of the religions of the world for their entire lifetime. But if you want to be a teacher, that's a whole different ballgame, is it not? One would then have to become a dedicated member of that religion. And again, it generally involves a name change, and then perhaps teach. And in this way, we can be relatively assured of not getting fooled by the delusional universal gurus. Do you dig it? Yeah, I get it. Maybe you're saying you don't get it. It's okay, too. I mean, we don't want to push anything on anybody. I mean, we want to stand up for what we think is true. And then life goes on. But we're all in this together, and we can't force ourselves to grow up. And, that's not coming from a condescending point of view. But one thing, we do have to exercise some measure of respect for older people. This is really, it's always been common within the Hindu Dharma and really all traditions. Obviously, if the person has lived a criminal life, obviously that's not to be respected. But for the most part, if somebody reaches their quote-unquote golden years, if you will, they've had a lot of life experiences, a lot of joy and a lot of suffering too. So we really just have to bow to that and respect that and seek learning where we can. And that's really the best that we can do in any one life. But of course, as Hindus, we believe in samsara or many lifetimes. Remember, when you're being taught, in this case, yoga, and everything that goes with it, chakras, kundalini, mantras, chakras, and all, you're being taught, whether you know it or not, a world view. So therefore, you really want to find somebody who's teaching classical Hindu yoga, and hopefully they're not coming from a negative sectarian group. Remember, in the Hindu Yoga Dharma, we have various sects. Basically, it's the worship of the Shiva family, Ganesh, Muruga, Shiva Shakti, and the Vaishnava family, Ganesha, and Krishna, and Vishnu, and Lakshmi, and Hanuman, and Sitaram. Ganesha is always the foundation of all the sampradayas. Or we have a sampradaya that just focuses on the Matajis, Kali, Durga, Parvati, Mahalakshmi, Saraswati. So those are basically the three sampradayas or sects of Hinduism. And hopefully we three respect each other. But one will find that they're probably attracted more to one than the other, and that's just the way life goes. So again, if this has been some benefit to you and helped you get out of a negative situation, if you've been involved in one of these universalist cults, or hopefully heal from a previous encounter with them. So again, we're just doing the best we can, and here's a profound ending that we always use at our satsangs, our gatherings of truth, as we're just trying to figure things out, and it's open to debate and discussion, of course. So we always end with Asato ma sadgamaya. Lead me from untruth to truth. Just trying to be honest with ourselves and go from untruth to truth, or unreal to real, or we could say phony to real in today's parlance. And this we find in our ancient Vedic scriptures 2,000 years ago or more than that. So this is nothing new, obviously. So the rishis then were saying, Asato ma sadgamaya, lead me from untruth to truth. From a relatively ignorant state to a more enlightened state of being, tamaso ma jyotir gamaya. Remember, lack of knowledge is one thing, which we all have, obviously. There's always somebody who knows more or less. But ignorance is when we're just really choosing to ignore the facts. I mean, come on, people. You hear the word yoga, all you have to do is look it up and you'll find out that it's all about Hinduism. How can people be so fooled by that? That's true ignorance. That's ignoring. Ignorance is the unhealthy dance, if you will, of ignorance. And then finally, there is an inner nectar, if you will, an amritam, that is rational, that is logical, that is at the core of all of us as humans and our animal friends too. And right now our ashram cat is sitting on my lap here. It's just pure love and light and energy. As we are too. We are that pure energy. Remember, that's generals, and specifically we would say Shakti in Hinduism. We are that inner experience of light, and light we're meant to be, that visions, dreams, imaginations, the feeling of lightness. Hindus call this Jyoti. And then that inner feeling, hopefully, of warmth and bliss. This is the science of life. The love and the light and the energy. The Big Bang of creation, from the nothingness into the pure energy, sound energy, light energy, heat energy, which then becomes the human emotion of love, the warm experience of love or bliss. Satchidananda, pure existence, pure consciousness, pure energy, light, heat, bliss, Satchit Ananda. That's our descriptive word for the Atmana, that inner essence which is temporarily inhabiting the body, mind, and emotions, but it is not the body or the mind, like the soul, psyche is still in the mind. It's not the body, the mind, or the emotions, temporarily residing within them. As we like to say, love, light, and energy, Om, this are we. Om Amritam, that inner nectar, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya, and seeking a peace that's a peace through justice and strength. Hindus call this Shanti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.